Origin is known for three things. One being the most made in the United States boot of all time by a mile. No one's even close, because every single component is made in the United States, not just sourced and finished in the United States, actually manufactured in the United States, down to the thread, the eyelets, the laces, except for one part, which we'll go over, which is the midsole. Second thing they're known for is being this unique hybrid of heritage style boot, but still being really lightweight, flexible, and kind of an athletic feel, which is usually the opposite of what you get in heritage style boots. And three, in line with that, the guys that run this and own this are big jiu-jitsu guys. They're all jacked, they're super strong. So a lot of their products and a lot of the way their products work are centered around guys that are really active, athletic, and it makes for a really unique boot. So when they came out with an even more flexible, more breathable boot, it really piqued my interest. We're gonna cut this thing in half, run it through our test to really start figuring out what's different about this boot compared to the other ones that we've cut apart. Why is the leather so stiff on a boot that was made to be more breathable and more flexible? How is CORDURA canvas different than regular canvas? And what are the two things they've changed about this boot that I'm really happy about compared to the very first one we cut apart? This is the Swayze wallet. It comes in all the other wallet colors that we have. We've been sitting on this design for quite a while. We used to sell it. And then I went to redesign it and just never finished it up, and I finally got around to it. And I love this wallet. It's still hand sewn, still has our veg tan leather that we get from Wicked and Craig, a true veg tan, so it ages really beautifully, develops a really nice patina, molds the shape of your cards, and no matter how much you beat it up, it still looks really, really good with veg tan. It's hand sewn, no sewing machines, literally 2 needles on the end of a single thread, but we're saddle stitching these wallets together. It's a lot more labor intensive, but allows us to use a lot thicker thread, and it lasts a lot longer. And it's about as traditional of a way to make a wallet as humanly possible. So if you want a Swayze wallet where you can carry a ton of cards and have some separation, have your ID on the outside, your most used credit card, and all your junk cards on the inside with little cash receipts. Be sure to check out the Swayze wallet below. It comes in all the veg tan leathers with tan, light brown, medium brown, dark brown, and black, all from Wicked and Craig. So what is this boot? Well, the brand is Origin. The style is the Coronado 6-inch hybrid boot. They weigh 1 pound, 12 ounces. They retail for $299, made in the United States. And the way that they position this product is gear that's crafted for life. American legacy with modern innovation. Built to be worn in. Hybrid upper construction of CORDURA and Drylex layered panels with DWR, which stands for durable water treatment. DWR, DWT. That might be a typo on our end, for a more breathable, abrasion resistant, water repellent, and lightweight boot. If you want a pair of these, check them out, be links in my description. So let's start figuring out why this leather is so stinking stiff. Because it is a pretty nice leather. It's a full grain leather, it's tan to the United States. I think it's a Seidel leather, which is known for making some of the toughest and stiffest and hardest wearing leathers in the entire world. That's why the Pacific Northwest brands use them. And so that's part of why this is so stinking stiff. Because when I had tried these on during the unboxing vid we did on Anvil 2, I could hardly get them cinched up. And it is pretty thick. It's 2.3 to 2.5 millimeters thick. So that's why it's so stiff. It's a thick leather. It's a really heavy duty work boot leather. So it will break in over time, but man, they are stiff when you first get them. So it's a smaller critique. Ideally, for a really lightweight, flexible boot, maybe have like a lighter, more oiled style leather that's gonna break in faster, but that's really not the main thing I'm curious about with this boot, because the CORDURA is really interesting to me, because if you don't know what CORDURA is, it's a type of nylon canvas that's really flame resistant. Firefighting pants are made out of it, like the green pants. Actually, they look a lot like these. And because it's nylon, it's really abrasion resistant. And we did the flame test on it to show you the difference between just a regular cotton canvas compared to this CORDURA. And you can see how much more flame resistant the CORDURA is. It's self-extinguishing versus the cotton just lights up and burns all the way up the sample. And so that's why wildland firefighters wear CORDURA pants, because imagine cotton pants out there and you start on fire, it just turned to a human candle. It's smart that they use CORDURA, because if you're welding in these, if you're doing some grinding on metal, whatever you happen to be doing around fire, it's not gonna start melting this, because it's not just flame resistant, but it's also heat resistant. And another thing that they've done that I really like along those same lines is the tongue is gusseted up to the 3rd eyelet. So similar thing, if you're grinding on metal or you're welding or whatever you happen to be doing, you're not gonna get sparks in the inside of your boot. Junk just generally is not gonna get inside of there. Because I believe the first ones, because I got one here, yeah, it was not gusseted at all. It was all the way down to the 1st eyelet, so it's built kind of like a sneaker. Which there's pros and cons, like without a gusset, it's gonna be more flexible, easier break in, less bulk over top of your foot, but you're gonna get more protection and more boot qualities out of a gusseted tongue. So I like that a lot more. So that to me is an improvement on it. And then if we start looking at the inside of the boot, we've got this Drylex lining. So this is pretty similar to what you see in like a sneaker that has that jersey type material that's moisture wicking, that also allows for breathability. So it's not gonna be as durable as their other boots that are full leather, that have that leather counter on the inside. But one nice thing that they've done is there's a strip of leather up that heel stay. So at least you have one little bit of leather protecting that seam, and it's gonna give it a little bit more wear resistance. But honestly, ideally for me, I'd rather just have that full heel counter leather so that you have 0 spots to potentially wear through while still maintaining that breathability. And I don't think they're waterproof. I don't think there's a waterproof lining on the inside, so you could still get away with doing that full leather counter in there. And speaking of the waterproofing, this is treated with that DWR treatment that adds water resistance to it. We put it in the waterproof tank to see how waterproof it was. Not very waterproof. And then if we look at the insole, it's basically the exact same insole they've been putting into their boots for the last few years. It's a closed cell foam. It's got a good amount of squish to it. It's not nearly as dead as some of the really open cell foam, so it's a pretty decent insole. But this insole also shows you something they've also changed in this. If you look at the width of this toe box compared to this very first version, you can see it's wider. And even just taking like a quick, not very scientific measurement, just kind of taking the general width, about a 1/4 inch wider. It just gives you a little bit more wiggle room. Doesn't push that big toe in nearly as much. So that's a really nice addition to this to make it just a little bit wider. Then underneath the insole, you still have that Poron type foam, that kind of like a memory foam underneath of that. That is Blake stitched all the way around the inside. And so there's that stitch line that holds the upper to this midsole. And then you also have that stitch down here that sews the vamp down to the midsole. So you have 2 types of construction in one boot. And because it's this Blake stitch rather than the really heavy Goodyear welt or even a stitch down all the way through, it is a more flexible boot because of that. And the downside of having just a stitch down around there rather than a bunch of nails, it's not gonna be as durable. So if you're prying this off every single day with the heel, there's a chance that you're gonna pull that stitching apart, but it still is a very strong way of making a boot. It's just not as durable as some of the most durable boots in the world. And I would be very careful about prying these off with your feet. I would not do that in these boots. And Origin's really one of the only brands, if not the only brand, that's doing this combination of a stitch down toe and a Blake stitch construction. And even more so, like, their patterning is just wild. And one thing I really like about them is their patterning is unique, and it makes a difference, but it's also functionally based, because up through here, where a lot of people have a lot of pain with the counters coming over top and the way that that quarter panel comes down through here, this allows tons of room there for your foot to kind of expand that out with. And so it's, once again, it's not gonna be as supportive as a really heavy boot that's wrapped around your foot, but for a more athletic, lightweight boot, it's smart that they do these panelings, and it also is unique. And they've done that same thing with this new hybrid, where, you know, traditionally the very first Jungle Boot, if you've seen those Jungle Boot videos, it was just a single panel of canvas. And then over time, they added a little, basically a tie-down strap to the inside of the boot to reinforce that area. And so Origin has done the same thing. Instead of doing a strap, they've just integrated it into the pattern of the upper that ties in this flex point to the lacing, so that you don't have all that tension pulling on just that Cordura canvas. It's anchored in by that little strip right there. Pretty smart way of making a boot. And then for this model, they have the Christie outsole on it, because I think every other one we've done is either the lug sole or this really nice little mini Vibram lug. But the Christie is a really popular outsole for guys that work because it's really soft, it's rubber based, it's a blown rubber, so it's lightweight, still get the grippiness of rubber. It doesn't last nearly as long as like a solid rubber outsole, but it's significantly more comfortable. And because of how this boot is made, anytime you wear this outsole out, all you gotta do is go to your local cobbler, and all they do is peel this old one off, and then glue a new one on, because there's no stitching holding it all on. Which, once again, you lose some of that durability and that longevity to make it a little bit more flexible and easier to resole. But it's not out of the ordinary to see brands just glue the outsole on. Sometimes you see stitching in the toe, but it's common enough that I don't think it's an issue. This is that heritage style where you can have these resoled several times. You pay that bigger upfront cost, but it pays itself off over the few years that you have them in the resoles. And you still might not end up on top by having a heritage boot, but the value comes from the fact that you don't have to re-break in the upper, that you don't have to buy a brand new one, it reduces waste. And since they use this really hard and stiff work boot leather, you really see the value of why they use such a stiffer leather down the road, when it's durable enough that it doesn't rip and it doesn't split, and you're able to resole these a few times. So you get that glove-like fit that you've broken them in once, and you get to use several resoles in the same boot. Unless you wear out the inside of the lining or some of the canvas pulls away, but we don't really know because they're brand new boots. So once again, it's that constant balancing act of trying to maintain the qualities that you get from a heritage boot while still making them flexible and athletic and lightweight enough that they don't feel like really heavy duty boots all day, every day. So now let's cut them in half and see if there's any other changes on the inside. All right, we've got it cut in half, so let's see what's inside. So now that we can see on the inside, structurally it's basically the exact same, except for two things. One, they've used the grain leather in the lining instead of the previous more suede lining, so you get that grain that's gonna be a little bit stronger. And so that's why I wish they would just do the counter cover in the same leather as well, because you can still get the breathability and everything. But more importantly, a really good change that a lot of people have been asking Origin for a long time is they added a fiberglass shank. Because I believe all their previous boots didn't have a shank. Let me do a quick little test. There's no shank in there. What a shank does is just support that gap caused by a heel. And a lot of times you don't need it in a wedge sole because obviously it's full contact with the ground. But if you're standing on ladders, if you're hitting shovels all day, or you're putting any pressure right in that spot where the shank is, you're gonna want a shank, otherwise it's just gonna wear your feet out. And there's several types of metals or materials you can use. There's steel, there's wood, there's fiberglass, there's composite, there's really cheap like plastic shanks. And fiberglass is a really good option for this style of boot because it is a little bit more flexible than steel. It's steel supportive, it's fiberglass so that you're not gonna break it, unlike wood. And so it really is the perfect choice for this specific type of shoe where they want it to be lightweight and athletic. So now that we know everything on the inside, what they've changed and what they've adjusted, is it worth $299? To me, it clearly is. You know, Red Wings, they're anywhere from $300 and $350, built in a very similar way. The biggest difference is a Goodyear welt versus this Blake stitch and stitch down construction. But material-wise and construction-wise, these are cheaper than Red Wings and they're more made in the United States, and Red Wings are really well priced because they're vertically integrated. And so to me, these are easily worth that $300, especially with basically every single piece being manufactured and sourced from the United States, except for that midsole. One day they're gonna find that midsole in the US somewhere, and then there'll be no arguing that they're the most United States made boot of all time. So did they pull it off? Did they make a more breathable, more athletic, lightweight, flexible version of their boot? It seems like they did. You know, there's still a couple spots I think they could improve on, but across the board, they chose smart materials. They used unique materials that are still sourced in the United States. They've improved a lot of things, and that leather is tough to break in. That's one thing that I think they could maybe play with, because it's a pretty tough leather. But at the same time, it's that trade-off of like the softer the leather, the thinner the leather, the less durable it's gonna be. So this boot is that perfect example of constant trade-offs, because they're constantly balancing those two things of the heritage boots being durable and rugged and stiff and hard, but still trying to make them athletic and lightweight, more like the modern foam boots. And that's what makes them unique. Aside from the buff jiu-jitsu dudes running this business with Jocko and all those dudes, and endorsements from Joe Rogan, and he actually had a pretty sick, they made him a really cool boot where it was out of an elk hide he made, and I think the bullet hole was right here. Some people think it's more, but I think it's cool. So let me know what you guys think and your experience in these. What would you change? What do you think of your Origin boots if you have a pair? And thank you guys for supporting these videos and everything we do on this channel, the Rose Anvil 2 channel. If you want to watch unboxing, that's on Rose Anvil 2, and our handmade leather goods and all the collaborations that are making all this possible. So thank you guys. See ya. And, but, got a delivery.